Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to the story and I was thinking that unfortunately it's a very common story, right? We at the World Resources Institute did a very large project where we looked at access to water in 15 cities in the global south, 5 in Latin America, 5 in sub-Saharan Africa, and 5 in South Asia. And we found on average only about 58% of households had access to piped water. And those, as your segment said, Roee, those households that had access to piped water they had water supplies intermittently. And we know that when you only have water some hours of the day, some days per week, that jeopardizes your water quality.
And it's not just about the piping. You can have piping, but if there's not electricity for the pumps, nothing is bringing the water to your community. It seems that this is also really highlighting some of the water inequity exposed during COVID.
Absolutely. So, as you said, I think COVID really underscores inequality in water access. That inequality existed long before COVID, and I have concerns that it's going to exist long after COVID. We've just become, in some senses, more aware of it because of the public health recommendations to thoroughly wash your hands frequently and for 20 seconds and things like this. Then you become really aware when you don't have water in your house. You have to leave your home, you have to walk somewhere, you have to maybe wait in line near other people, and you have to transport water back to your home. So it just really underscores the inequity in water access.
This year's theme for World Water Day is valuing water. How does one measure the value of water? I mean, it's not really traded as a commodity, is it?
I am really glad you asked that question because I actually have been working on this area for a while, and I think that gets to the heart of the problem, is this idea of thinking about water as a commodity. Access to water is a basic human need, and we need to collectively change our ethos about how we think about water. Over the last 30 years, there have been efforts to privatize water, particularly in developing countries, particularly in cities in developing countries, and then to corporatize water utilities. This, by and large, has not improved access to safe, reliable, and affordable water.
The UN has come up with some specific plans in terms of water. Can you talk about some of those goals and where the organization stands in terms of reaching its milestones?
Yeah, so I think you're mostly referring to the Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which tries to achieve equitable access to water for all and water access and sustainable management of water. It also deals with sanitation, which is a big part of the story. It's very difficult to give people access to safe water when you haven't fixed your sanitation system, particularly in dense urban areas.
Organizations like the one that you're a fellow at, the World Resources Institute, try to give policy suggestions to governments. What do they need to do to ensure that this basic need is actually available and affordable for every household? What kind of legislation, for example, is in the works?
It's such a good question. So I do a lot of work at the city level, and at the city level, I think there's really 4 things that you need to think about. You need to think about households having access to piped water, particularly in dense urban areas. You need to make sure that that water is available around the clock, 7 days a week, 24/7, so you don't have this problem of intermittency, and then households using coping mechanisms. The unit price of water needs to be affordable. And then you have to ensure the quality of the water that households receive is safe to consume. When you ask about policies, though, it gets really complicated. You also need to think beyond city jurisdictions to protecting water from the source, which means protecting forests, better agricultural practices. But ultimately, it's going to be a problem of political will. You're going to need a massive amount of national investment and international donors investing in water infrastructure. And again, I mostly work in cities, so I think in terms of infrastructure systems.
So what can people watching at home, what can they do? I mean, it's not as simple as take shorter showers, is it?
Not at the sort of global scale, not in terms of the gap that we're seeing between those who rise in urban population. Issues of climate change are going to increase water scarcity. And so the gap between those who have and those who don't have water might get worse before it gets better. It's really going to require a collective will and commitment to investment. Like we think about access to primary education or health care for expecting mothers. We need to think about access to water as a basic human need.